Okay guys, so stupid. I totally just started recording but didn't actually start recording. So anyway, that was really stupid. But anyway, hey guys, it's Tori and today I'm going to be doing the Unpopular Opinions book tag. This tag was originally created by The Book Archer, which I will link their original video if it's still around down below. If not, I will at least link their channel if it's still up. I'm not sure. I know this tag has been going around for a couple years now. So anyway, and I was tagged by Emily from Novel Novels, so I will link her video down below as well. So I actually am pretty sure that I did this tag last year, but I feel like it's a tag where you can have a lot of different answers. So when I was tagged by Emily, I was like, sure, I will totally do it again and just talk about different books. I did not, however, go back and review that video, so I apologize if there are any repeats. There might be one or two, but I'm pretty sure for the most part these are all different because they're books I read more recently. So let's just get right into the questions. The first question is probably the most obvious question that would be on here, and that is, what is one popular book or series that you didn't like? And for this one, I'm going to have to go with A Darker Shade of Magic by Victoria Schwab, or V.E. Schwab. I unfortunately did not love this series. In fact, I feel like most people didn't really love the first one, like it was just fine for most people, and then the second and third really took them by surprise and they really enjoyed them. For me, it was the other way. I really enjoyed the first one and I saw a lot of potential, but then the story just was very non-cohesive to me. I just felt like it had so much potential to be very interesting and it just was very run-of-the-mill in my opinion. Like the whole bad guy situation was very just like a generic bad guy who just wants to take over the world because it's just pure evil, and there was nothing more interesting than that. I felt like the main characters bothered me a lot. I didn't like the main romance at all. Basically, I just felt like it could have been a lot more interesting than it ended up being, and I will say there's one character in that series that I love to death, one of my favorite characters I've ever read about, which is why for a while I kept my copies of the series despite not liking it, because I was like, I just love this character, but I ended up getting rid of them because I just really was not wowed by them, and I don't think I'll ever reread them despite loving that one character. So the second question is, what is a popular book or series that everybody seems to hate but that you love? And for this, I'm going with a book that I don't think most people really hate, but I know a lot of people don't love it as much, and that is Sense and Sensibility by Jane Austen. This isn't my favorite Jane Austen, but I feel like for a lot of people it's like their least favorite, and for me it's not even my least favorite of the four that I've read. I actually really enjoyed this. I flew through this book. I think I read this book faster than I've ever read a Jane Austen in my life thus far. I really, really liked it. It just pulled me right in. It's definitely like, out of the four I've read, like my third favorite, so it is lower down, but only because I like Pride and Prejudice and Emma more, as opposed to not really liking Sense and Sensibility. I actually really liked a lot about Sense and Sensibility, so yeah, so that one's not quite an answer to the question, but I was really struggling with coming up with one that I know a lot of people hate that I don't like, because most of the books that a lot of people hate I either just don't have an interest in anyway, or recently I just haven't really read very many books that are pretty popular on BookTube in particular, so I just haven't had much experience with that, so I decided to go with this. Question 3 is, what is a love triangle where the main character or the middle person ended up with someone that you didn't want them to end up with? To be honest, they almost always end up with the one I wanted them to. I'm pretty, like, I feel like usually in love triangles, especially nowadays, the author makes it very clear who this person's going to end up with, so it's easier to get behind them because it's obvious. Like, you know who they're gonna be with. You think of Hunger Games, you knew she was gonna be with who she ended up with. I don't know, maybe you don't, and so I'm not gonna spoil it, but you know most of the time. The author makes it pretty dang obvious, in my opinion. I will say some Hardy novels, Hardy has a lot of love triangles, but I love his because you never really know who they're gonna end up with, and it's a lot more complex than just like, I like both of them and I don't know who I want to be with. No, it's a lot more complex than that, because marriage at that time obviously was more about other things besides love in society, so I think those are really interesting. And there are some of Hardy's where they end up with someone I didn't want them to end up with, but you're not really supposed to want them to end up with that person usually. So I wanted to come up with one where like you're kind of supposed to root for the love triangle or who they end up with. Well, I kind of stretched my answer a little bit, but getting to my answer, I decided to go with Three Dark Crowns by Kendare Blake, and there's a love triangle in this that rather than just like hating who the person ended up with, I just felt like it didn't need to happen at all. Like it genuinely, like other love triangles I know they don't technically need to happen at all, but usually they add some sort of drama to the story and it's kind of interesting, but this one was just absolutely ridiculous. Like it ended up being completely meaningless in the end. By the end of like the second book, it ended up being completely meaningless. And I thought it was just stupid to have even included it. Like, it did nothing for the story, really. And, man, Three Dark Crowns is one of those series that there's so much potential in it, and I kept my copies, and I'm probably gonna reread them because I love the world so much. I think it's so interesting and cool, but the plot itself could have been so much more interesting and could have done so many cool things, and it hinted at possibilities of all these cool things, and then it just fell so short. Like, it just ended up doing what it said it was gonna do the whole time, and I was like, why would you just like make it? There was no real shockers in the end. I mean, to some extent there was, but in the end, none of the big plot twists mattered because it just ended the way it always said it was going to, and it wasn't even like an interesting ending. I don't know. And there were so many subplots that just kind of faded out, and it was so unfortunate. But I still think the world is so fascinating, and so much could have been done, but wasn't. But anyway, my answer to this question is not only should the person not have ended up with who they ended up with, but also it just shouldn't have even been a thing. It shouldn't have been an issue, and it ended up being meaningless anyway. So, question 4 is, what is a popular genre that you very rarely pick up? And for this, I'm going to go with romance. I feel like this is one a lot of people don't really pick up a lot, but there are some hardcore romance fans out there. There are a lot of people on BookTube who just love romance and pick it up all the time, and I just am not one of those people at all. I only honestly read a romance book that's not a classic romance because classic romances have a lot more to them because society at that time, like, just falling in love wasn't enough. Like, there was a lot more going on in regards to marriage than there is today, and so a romance novel today, written today, is going to focus a lot more on just like the falling in love portion. And that's just not as interesting to me. I usually read at least one a year because I do get in the mood sometimes, but I'm never one to be in the mood and like will spend a whole month reading a bunch of romance. Like, that's just not me. I might just pick up one every once in a while, but very rarely do I read just straight up romance, unless it's a classic romance, but even then it's not really the same. So, number 5, a popular character that you didn't like. I am going to go with Elias from An Ember in the Ashes, and this is one where it's not like I actively dislike him, it's more just I just didn't see the draw to him. I just never really had that much interest in him. I just felt like he was a YA character. Like, there was nothing that stood out to me in him. I also will say that An Ember in the Ashes is a series where I loved the first one. I thought the first one was so good, and I felt like the second one really fell flat for me, and I will not be continuing with the series because of it. Like, there were parts of the second book that I did enjoy, but I just really didn't care much about the characters, and that's so key to me. Like, I need a balance of both plot and characters, but I'm more likely to be okay with a book with less plot and more character than with a book with less character and more plot most of the time. It kind of is dependent on different things, but Elias himself was just pretty bland to me, unfortunately. So sorry if you love Elias. He just didn't stand out to me. Basically, he wasn't a standout character for me. Number 6 is a popular author you just can't get into, and for this I'm going to go with V.E. Schwab. I know I mentioned her a little bit at the beginning, but not even just with The Darker Shade of Magic, but I also read The Savage Song was the other one I read by her, and while I enjoyed that, I gave it 4 stars. It wasn't enough to, like, I didn't even care to continue with the series, like, and it's only a duology, like, I only had one more book, but I just didn't care enough, and as time has gone on, I've pretty much forgotten about it. Like, it just wasn't very memorable. I probably could change it to a 3-star read just because of that, but I'll leave it at 4 stars because I did really enjoy the process of reading that a lot. I just didn't care enough once it was over, if that makes sense. So yeah, I mean, I will say there are a few of her books that I have some interest in, The Near Witch being one, even though I know that's one of her least well-loved books. Based on what people have said, it just has a sort of atmosphere that I think I would enjoy. Even, I wouldn't expect to give it 5 stars, but I think I would at least enjoy the process of reading it, potentially. Vicious is another one. I know that a lot of people love that book. If I ever read it, I don't think I would ever pick up Vengeful, because I've just heard so many mixed things about that with my feelings towards Victoria Schwab, I just don't even want to take a chance of having a book. If I did love Vicious, I wouldn't want to take a chance of Vengeful ruining that, because, like I said, I haven't had a great experience with Victoria Schwab yet. And her recent book, The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue, is another one that I have some interest in. So those 3 potentially, but I also don't know if I'm interested enough in them to go out of my way to read them anytime soon. So yeah, just so far I really haven't been able to get into Victoria Schwab, unfortunately. Number 7 is a popular book trope you are tired of seeing. And I think in my last one, what I said was like the immortal, usually man, an immortal being who ends up falling in love with a 16-year-old girl. I just despise that trope so much, but since I already said that, that's kind of an honorable mention in case you didn't see that video, because I'm very passionate about hating that trope. But the other one that I wanted to mention that recently this year I've thought a lot about is the runaway royal trope, where you have a prince or a princess who doesn't want to get married or doesn't want to become king or queen or whatever, and runs away because they want to find their independence and be left alone. I despise this trope, and here's why. I study a lot of history, and I really like learning about the medieval period. I really like learning about the Tudors, all that jazz. And if a prince or princess, especially because they're usually an only child in these situations, if one of them did this, ran away from their responsibilities, this could cause civil war. Like, this could cause so much bloodshed. And so it's so selfish to me. I'm just like, you have so many lives on your hands, such a great responsibility. I know it's hard, but get over yourself, basically, is how I feel every time I read this. I'm so sick of seeing it. It's just so, and it's such an individualistic society type story. America is all about, you know, independence and autonomy and finding yourself. And that's what this trope is trying to do and show, and you know, I think it gets to a lot of people's hearts because of that. But if you really think about it, choices like that are very selfish, and they have such a bad effect on society. Like, I just feel like if you want to change from a monarchy, find a way to do that, but running away is not going to help anybody. And it just drives me crazy. I prefer stories where, for example, like The Queen of the Tearling, where they take that responsibility, they recognize their responsibility to their people, and are willing to do what needs to be done. And I think it's more interesting to see them deal with the stresses of those responsibilities, and to really try to find a way to be a good leader, recognize that they're not going to be liked by everybody no matter what, that it's really difficult. And I think that's going to be a lot more interesting to read about than about some poor, selfish little 16-year-old who doesn't want to, you know, usually it's a princess who doesn't want to get married. Okay, look, I can respect that, but at the same time, like, this is just how alliances are made. This is how you can get help and support for your country. Get over yourself. I'm sorry you weren't born into a position where you could just go and run away and fall in love, or where you can just not get married at all if you choose. But to be frank, it's just the way it is, and I just feel like they just don't show any concern for their country usually when those things happen, and it drives me up a wall. I hate it so much. I feel like you can have that independent woman trope in your book while also recognizing that she has responsibilities to other people. and I feel like that trope does not do that very well. So anyway, question 8 is a popular book or series that you have no interest in reading at all. And for this question, I considered some series that I've started that I've decided not to read. I've considered some book series that I don't really think I'll ever get to, but there's still, for a lot of them, there's still a part of me that is slightly interested. So I really wanted to try to think of a series that I have absolutely no interest in picking up, and so I finally figured out one that's been pretty popular in recent years, and that is The Cruel Prince by Holly Black. I really have no interest in reading this. It just sounds like your run-of-the-mill angsty YA fantasy, which is totally fine. I don't mind books like that, but I just don't think this one draws me in any way, shape, or form. Like, there's no even aspect of it that I'm like, ooh, maybe I'd be interested in that trope or whatever. I just don't really care, and I'm never gonna read it. Plus, I've heard a lot of people be disappointed by the ending of the trilogy anyway, so I'm like, why would I put myself through something where I don't even think I'll like it in the first place and then have it have a crappy ending? So anyway, never gonna read that. Sorry if you love it, but it's just, I just don't think it's for me, unfortunately. And question 9 is, what is a movie that you like more than the book? And for this one, I think this is the one that I may be repeating myself. I can't remember what I said last time on this at all. And again, I didn't look it up because I'm too lazy, but I ended up going with Austenland by Shannon Hale. I really love the movie of this. Don't love the book, unfortunately. I mean, okay, I don't want to say I don't love the book because I think the book is really good and sweet, but the humor that's in the movie just cannot be replicated in the book at all. It's just not possible to write that kind of humor in a book. Like, you have to be able to visualize it and see it in a film, and I just really like the movie of Austenland. I also feel like there's an added element to one of the male characters in Austenland that in the movie I prefer to what he is in the book. That's very vague, but yeah, there's a certain character who has a slightly different background between the book and the movie, and I like the movie version of his background better. So anyway, really like that movie. If you haven't seen it, definitely check it out. It's so funny, especially if you like Jane Austen and like Regency romances and that stuff. Like, it's just kind of making fun of that in a very hilarious way. So anyway, that is it for me. Let me know down below some of your answers to these questions if you have any, as I would love to know. Also, if you have a YouTube channel and you would like to do this tag, feel free to consider yourself tagged. I'm not going to tag anyone simply because this is a pretty popular Unpopular Opinions tag that a lot of people have done, so I'm not sure who has done it already, who would be interested in doing it again. So I'm just going to say, if you're watching this, you want to do it, you are tagged, feel free to do it and to say that I tagged you. And if you do it, please link your video down below in the comments, as I would love to watch. Again, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye!